Hi, class. Before you start reading The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman, I wanted to take some time to give you a heads up of what you can expect while reading. The short story is titled The Yellow Wallpaper, and to get you in the mindset, I'm looking at a PowerPoint that I've included in the course. I'm going to go through the PowerPoint with you. I'm not going to read each slide, but I'm going to give you some heads up of what you can expect that is contained on each slide and that will appear in the story. So the very first slide is me asking you to make it relevant. This is where I'm asking you to get your schema activated. What do you already know about the content of the yellow wallpaper that you can already relate to before you even start reading? So I have 3 questions that I'd like you to think about. You can answer these, of course, in your own head, on a piece of paper as you take notes, with people around you, if you're at home, but regardless, I want you to be thinking of these. So have you ever had a person in your life that exaggerated facts and details? What kinds of things did they embellish or misremember? And why do you think this person chose to embellish the truth? With these 3 questions, I'm trying to get you to make this story relevant, to really get into the characters' heads that you're going to be reading about, and to consider at the end of the day what makes this narrator choose to act the way that she does in the story. The Yellow Wallpaper is the story of a woman's cure that led to her illness. I want you to be thinking of that as you read, because as you read this story, I want you to pay attention to the way you believe if the narrator has been successful in her mission of finding a cure for her illness, or if in fact she has become more ill. And we'll get into that in just a minute. So as you continue on throughout the slide, the very first thing that you're going to find out about this story is it is written in first person point of view. Most of you know that that means that we'll see those I statements and really be forced to rely on this one person the entire time. What's amazing about this is that the author purposely does this for us so that we have one person's account of a story to rely on, and we have to consider, is it in fact reliable? Which brings me to the next vocabulary term that I'd like you to make sure that you have in the back of your mind as you're reading, and that is unreliable narrator. Just by looking at the term unreliable, you know that that's someone that's not trustworthy, and the narrator is just the person that's going to be telling the story. In this case, and in this course's case, the narrator is female. This narrator might be unreliable for a variety of reasons: mental illness, dishonest personality, something to hide, a secret. But in this case, we will see that the narrator has a certain illness that can occur after pregnancy. What's important to remember is that the narrator's account of events should always be taken into consideration before we believe what the narrator has to say. In the Yellow Wallpaper, what makes it such an intriguing story is that the whole time that you're reading, you're forced to trust this narrator and her account of what's happening. However, in the back of your mind, you have to consider, is this all in fact true? There are some famous examples of unreliable narration. Edgar Allan Poe is one of the authors that includes unreliable narrators in his stories to kind of reveal aspects of the human condition that in society we tend not to trust for certain reasons. And these authors, like Edgar Allan Poe, want us to consider, should we not trust these people for a reason? Or is that society's way of kind of normalizing things that maybe shouldn't be normal? Or society's comments on things that are normal, but are made to seem unnormal? Another example is in the Fight Club. You might have seen the movie Fight Club, and what happens is the narrator suffers from dissociative personality disorder, and the narrator realizes that he is the protagonist and antagonist at the same time throughout the story. A little bit of background information on Charlotte Perkins Gilman, which is really important, is that she suffered from a severe and continuous nervous breakdown, attending toward melancholia and beyond. What this is saying is that our author used her own life events to fictionalize the story, The Yellow Wallpaper, in order to make a comment on the way she was treated by society as a woman who suffered from postpartum depression. She was prescribed what was known as the rest cure, and this will become a buzz term for you, that advised against more than 2 hours of intellectual stimulation. So that means reading, writing, drawing, socializing, painting. Doctors believed that if you were to rest, it would cure you of your disorder or mental illness. The key here is rest in isolation in order to cure a mental illness. Charlotte Perkins Gilman eventually went against the orders of her doctors and continued writing, and that inspired the yellow wallpaper. Again, it's based on her personal experience. And so what we have to consider is, was the rest cure effective based on Charlotte Perkins Gilman's experience and the narrator's experience, or because she went against the orders of the rest cure, could it have been effective if she had followed orders? So keep that in mind. Postpartum depression is what the narrator is going to suffer from, and this occurs when a woman experiences severe depression after she gives birth. This might be simply because she carried a baby for 9 months and that part of her is no longer a part of her in terms of the bodily form. It might be that the baby is not attaching to her, or she is not attaching to the baby right away, and so depression occurs. Postpartum depression is something that even occurs in today's society. And as you see, more women, especially celebrities, are speaking about their postpartum depression in order to normalize this. However, during this time, the early 19th century, the early 20th century and late 19th century, when this story was written, the understanding of postpartum depression was very skewed. Symptoms are negative feelings toward the baby, lack of pleasure in all or most activities, trouble sleeping, difficulty concentrating or thinking. And what's important here is feeling withdrawn, socially isolated, or unconnected. And so this idea of isolation here, especially social isolation, is important, because if someone already feels that, why give the rest cure to continue that isolation in order to fix this depression? That's what one should be thinking about. Before you start reading, I've also created an anticipation guide for you to agree or disagree with some of these statements in order to get you thinking. And when you are reading, I want you to really think about the people you know who may have suffered from mental illness or who are unreliable, and then consider in society's place, these anticipatory questions. I would also like you to pay attention to this idea of the crazy gauge. And what I've done is I've included a graph here that shows you, as you read, the narrator's sanity is going to decrease as the plot continues. And I want you to interpret that as you will as you read. You'll notice here that I want you to just be recording or thinking about events in the story that suggest her declining condition, and then pay attention to her submissive role in this society and in the situation that she's dealing with right now. So essentially, I'd like you to use this PowerPoint to get you thinking about the contents of the story, to give you the framework to be able to consider what was going on in Charlotte Perkins Gilman's life and how she actually used that to influence her story. Enjoy reading.